This is John Lynch of Lynch Solicitors, and this is an add-on or a follow-on to our video on making a will or an enduring power of attorney. And these are just some tips or hints that we will be offering people in addition to suggesting that they make a will or an enduring power of attorney. As I've said, an enduring power of attorney is where you nominate people to look after your affairs in the event that you lack capacity at any stage in the future. A will, on the other hand, is where you appoint somebody to carry out your wishes in the event of your demise or your death. So, a couple of things. First of all, maybe just a couple of tidy up exercises. If you hold property with somebody else, you should have a look at how you hold that property with them. If they're a spouse, you might consider transferring it to them as joint tenants. Now, what I mean by that is that you can hold property as tenants in common or as joint tenants. Joint tenants is our suggested option because the rule with a joint tenant, as opposed to a tenant in common, is that as a tenant in common, you have a notional share in the property, which you can give to whoever you wish. In the case of a joint tenancy, your interest automatically vests with the other party if you die. So it's survivor gets all. The other thing you should consider, of course, is if you're dealing with the family home, you can effect a transfer of the family home into joint names without any undue cost in doing that from a tax point of view. You should also consider transferring assets into joint names with spouses because, again, there's a tax break for that. There's no tax payable there. The other thing is to bear in mind, by the way, is that when you are transferring assets, you must be solvent to do that. If you're not solvent, those transfers can be subsequently reversed. The other suggestion that we often make to people is that if you have a credit union account, or if you have a pension, or if you have a life policy, you should consider exercising the option of a nomination. What I mean by that is you can nominate somebody to benefit directly without having to go through an estate. You should also look at, by the way, putting accounts into joint names, which is another way of ensuring that the survivor will get it without having to go to the hassle or the cost of probating the estate. The other suggestion that we'll often make to people when they're making wills is don't forget the other agreements. I mean, if you're getting married, think of a prenup. If you're living with somebody, think of a cohabitation agreement. If you own assets with somebody, think of a co-ownership agreement. If you're in business with somebody, don't forget to look at a partnership agreement or look at a shareholders agreement if it's a company. And the other thing that we often suggest to people is that when you're looking at transferring an asset, if there's a mortgage on it, you might consider paying off the mortgage, or if there's a mortgage on an asset, you might think of having mortgage protection so that in the event of your demise, that the asset goes free of the mortgage. The other thing to remember, by the way, is that if you're in a separation situation, you should try and, if you don't mind me using the term, tidy that up by way of dealing with it by way of divorce or separation agreement prior to making a will, because that then crystallizes what the entitlements of the former partner are in those circumstances. And finally, just to remember, nothing is cast in stone, so you should always regularly review any document that you do, whether it's a co-ownership agreement, whether it's a will, or whether it's an enduring power of attorney. It's always a good idea to kind of put a reminder to review it, let's say 2 to 3 years afterwards, and or if there's any kind of huge change in the circumstances, you should try and remember to renew it. Again, this is John Lynch, and thank you for listening to me.